Hello and welcome to Season 4, Episode 18 of Unlimited Opinions. I'm Adam Bishop.
I'm Mark Bishop.
And you are glowering somewhat. I don't know what's going on over there.
I don't either. I kind of feel like I should take a nap.
But
I always wake up from naps more cranky than I was before I took a nap.
Oh, that's great. We are, of course, reading Alan Ryan's On Politics, a book describing the history of political theory from Herodotus to the modern day. And this time we are focusing on the French Revolution and its critics. Of course, your favorite event in all of modern history.
Well, I was a little disappointed by this chapter that they didn't really flesh out, but I guess there really wasn't too much of a philosophy behind the mob murdering people.
Yes,
and but I thought we'd get at least some Robespierre philosophy. But I guess it's just so ridiculous when it came down to it. Like trying to change the weekly calendar to 10 days and worshiping some god of reason.
I was kind of thinking the same thing, but I think Alan Ryan is more focused on, what sort of political systems are people trying to come up with? Right. And like the biggest impact that the French Revolution had on those sorts of ideas is people's reactions to it almost, not necessarily them themselves. Yes.
Yeah, because they just ate itself. But they did more to actually follow through on their theories than a lot of these philosophers that we've been studying. They talk about a utopia in this. Well, they tried to create a utopia, and
they sure did.
And a pile of dead bodies. But anyway, I understand. But the focus is on this: is how did other people react to it? How did other people think to it? How did it affect political thought going forward?
Yeah.
As opposed to just a simple warning: never do this.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I was a little surprised and a little disappointed that I couldn't go on repeated rants.
I'm sure you will. I'm sure you will anyway. We'll get there.
Not really. I think when you talk about Burke and the others, it's, I don't see a whole lot of fertile ground for rants today.
You don't need fertile ground. You do it anyway. It'll happen. But we start off
spontaneous combustion.
It is exactly. But we start off with this idea of the living revolution. He says the chapter looks at how the revolution impacted conservative thinkers like Edmund Burke and Joseph de Maistre, reformers like Thomas Paine, and early socialist thinkers like Saint-Simon, I guess is probably how you'd say that. He's French.
Saint Simon.
Saint Simon. Sure.
That's how an American.
That's how you would say it. Yes.
That's somebody from Missouri says it.
He says the revolution was intellectually contentious and politically unpredictable. It began with a riot by the Paris mob and was substantially determined by these actions early on. So he's kind of saying, it kind of just was formed a lot in just violence here. Could never really find solid footing on what its political goal was overall, or what sort of system it was setting up, because they kept making new systems and destroying the people in charge.
Yeah. Well, and it is kind of curious, but I guess I understand it more now as I get older. How many people were just willfully blind to the fact that this was just an out of control, murderous regime?
Yeah,
very early on. And it was known to the world. The news was getting out, so that you couldn't say, "Well, I didn't know." You ignored it, and you didn't address it. But you see stuff going on in the world today, and people just ignore stuff now.
That is true.
They're not in this level of depravity, but not too much. But it's a matter of volume, I guess, as opposed to intent.
Yeah, true. He says the French Revolution began as if its aim was to catch up with the achievements of English and American precursors, of course, the English Glorious Revolution, the American Revolution against the British, but it quickly set utopian goals. He has a good quote here on page 617. Its motto of liberty, equality, and fraternity gave little hint that it would generate an astonishing mixture of class warfare, government by police spies, and the guillotine working overtime. In the process, the revolutionaries demonstrated what Madison had feared, that the sovereign people could behave worse than the monarchs that they had displaced. So, it was founded on good ideas, I guess, or good intentions, liberty, equality, fraternity, and then became something really just awful very quickly.
Yeah, if you look at their kind of founding documents, they're not much different than the Declaration of Independence. They're not much different than what the ideals are for the American Revolution. It's just they didn't really believe in them.
Pretty much.
It was a good excerpt. I had 2 stars next to that.
Yeah. Yes. He goes on to say that it invented the modern conception of a nation under arms and inherited the monarchy standing army and made it the cutting edge of revolutionary change, using the military, using this force to drive revolutionary change. It also abolished old forms of aristocratic privilege. Peasants were no longer performed forced labor, and ownership of property became more widely spread. So they did achieve some of the goals that they set out to do, but overall, he kind of acknowledges that the revolution provided no answer as to what political institutions it demanded.
Right.
They're demanding all of these things, but they couldn't really figure out how to get there politically, I suppose.
Right. And we can get into the criticism. Mm-hmm. A lot of it's from Burke, but so some of it was just when you read a little bit about the French Revolution, just the day to day, what they the different purges and the different activities. I mean, it's one thing to I get like them seizing all church assets, the Catholic Church assets. Well, I mean, some of that makes sense because they were so corrupt at the time and so wealthy and didn't do much of anything for the poor. But then when you round up rank and file priests and nuns and you cut off their heads, you put them in a dungeon for a while as they await their fate with no real sense of process or procedure, and they didn't really do anything. They're just part of the system, and they just kill them. I mean, it was just really horrific. Yeah, and I just wonder what got people to the point where that's okay. Yeah, or they just allowed it to happen. But it is what it is, and it's true, and it happened. It's important to not forget, because we're in a time now. Like, they wanted to redefine everything. They wanted to redefine reality. They wanted to redefine religion and God, and they have their own stupid deity that they created, the deity of reason or something. You're looking for something. What are you looking for?
My water bottle.
It's right in front of you.
Oh, it's right in front of me. Thank you.
Anywho, and we see a lot of that today. And so I was planning on, before I started reading this chapter, being able to go off on many rants on today's day and age. But
you still can.
Well, I think I guess what I'm going to try to stay focused is that Edmund Burke's criticism of the French Revolution is really good criticism of our current revolution within the United States.
Yes, but we'll get into that a little bit later.
And we're talking about what the new definition of a revolution, which is kind of a mixture, not just like throwing off one tyrant for another, or the people throwing off the dictator or the monarch or whatever, but it's more of a societal change, in economics, religion and everything like that. And we're just right now we're just experiencing a slow moving revolution of all those institutions in our country. And it's much smarter to do it this way, which actually Burke may support. Are we on Burke yet?
We are Burke. Well, we're going to get to Burke right now.
I'm going to give a little premonition of what your summary of Burke's. Burke believed that you should have a society that allowed change, but he was a really proponent of gradual change, and that makes a lot of sense, because revolutions are inherently dangerous, and if you have a revolution broadly defined, as I was just talking about. You can't affect change without chaos. You just loosen the bonds of society, and all of a sudden everything breaks loose. And so I think our current revolutionaries of the left in America have learned that lesson. Yeah. And they're slowly marching through our institutions, our church, our educational system, our government, everything, every aspect, media, news media, and Hollywood. And it's this slow, a methodical, like a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's a marathon revolution to change our country from what it was to what they want it to be. And they're winning.
Good thoughts. Yeah. Good thoughts.
That bleeds right into Burke.
That does bleed right into Burke. Yes, that is not a rant.
Calm.
That is very calm. That was good. That was good thoughts.
And made it relevant to today.
Very true. But to turn to Burke, we need to talk about who Burke is. He was born in Dublin in 1729 to a Protestant father and a Catholic mother. He graduated from Trinity College in 1748 and became the editor of the National Register. Later became the private secretary to the Whig politician Lord Rockingham, who found him a seat in Parliament. He argued for conciliatory policies towards the American colonists. He did not support American independence, but saw that war and separation were inevitable if both parties rigidly stuck to opposing sides. So kind of looking at things practically here. He also saw British rule in India as brutal and corrupt and certain to corrupt British politics. So he is both supportive of Britain's, sort of colonialist efforts in some places, and then in others, very critical of them. You look confused.
I think that's maybe an oversimplification, but because he supported the empire in all places.
Yes,
he did not support the means in which they administered their empire in either the United States or India. India was very brutal.
Yeah,
but India is a large country with a huge population. And I suppose that they just thought that's the way they had to do it. The United States was unique in that the population that was considered the population of the colonies was really a derivative of the English people. So,
True.
I mean, the population were Englishmen or other, emigres from Europe that then populated the 13 colonies. India was, I mean, they sent people there, but the numbers, they already had an existing huge population.
Of course.
And a society. And so, anyway, so he supported the empire in both locations, but he just thought that the colonialists were more independent and able to rule themselves more effectively. And so he was not in favor of them being cut loose, but certainly been given some accommodations due to their success at administering successfully their colonies, and I think he was probably right. If they would have followed his advice early on, or advice similar to that, the United States wouldn't be an independent country.
Probably not,
because it was they could have come to some sort of accommodation without, and the people wouldn't have supported a revolution. Anyway,
true. But yes, back to his life. He wrote extensively, particularly 2 pieces discussing the principles underlying successful parliamentary politics. One of those was Thoughts on the Cause of the Present Discontents, which argued that King George III had upset the balance of legislative and executive, and so he demanded for an end to the king's ability to secure parliamentary allies, essentially by purchasing them. He also defended political parties, interestingly. He defined them in a new way as a body of men united on a conception of the public interest. And this is kind of the idea of a political party that we have now, where previously it was just a group who desired to share the spoils of office. So really just like a political faction, sort of a family in a way that's just, wanting to split their success after they make it into politics.
That's pretty much what our political parties are now.
Well, have become, yes. But
right.
What we think of, I guess, the definition as it should be,
is what he thinks.
It should be. Yes.
Right. Agreed.
He also made it harder for anyone to assert that he was above party. You had politicians at this time. Well, I'm above party, but when you're defining it as just people who share common views, then nobody's above party because you share your views with somebody.
Correct.
Potentially.
And if anybody tells you, "Well, I'm above politics," or "I'm outside of politics," be forewarned that they are not above any of that. They are in it, and they are practicing it by pretending to be above or beyond politics every time. They're the most political, because at least a politician will say, "Yeah, I'm a politician. I'm running for office." What are you talking about? Of course I'm a politician. Somebody that says I'm not a politician, but they're seeking office, is a liar by definition.
Yes, because they have to be.
Or a fool.
Yes.
Because they don't even know what the term politician means, but they're not stupid. Well, a lot of them are, but not in that manner.
That is true.
Not on that issue. They know what they're talking about. Oh, I'm above that. I'm separate from that. I'm incorruptible. Oh, okay. Fast forward 2 years and they're in jail.
Yeah, no kidding. He also had the Speech to the Electors of Bristol of 1774, which spelled out the maxims of representative government. He pointed out that a representative is not the same thing as a delegate, and so a representative owes their constituents intelligence and judgment, not obedience to whatever they demanded. He also says that a representative represents those who voted against him, for him, and those who had no vote at all. He says he represents the nation as a whole, and anything else is just tyranny of the majority.
Yes.
So, when somebody is elected to office, they're not just listening to whatever group of benefactors, put them into office, or they shouldn't be listening to whatever group of benefactors put them into office. They should be listening to the whole people. But I think rarely does that actually happen.
Yeah, well, and he has some interesting thoughts on this subject, because there's still today a dialogue or a disagreement between or have different competing theories about what is your role when you get elected to something, whether you're on a city council, county, state, federal office. Are you just supposed to do what the people expect of you. You know, are you supposed to take a poll, and then if most of the people or the vast majority of people say do X, then you do X, even if you think not X is better, or are you there because they've chosen you to, as Burke would suggest and argue, that you're there to give your independent judgment. You're making a decision for them, and they elected you not to be just to do what they say to do, but instead to use your judgment. And it's an argument I've heard in person, I don't know how many times, in local from local officials that are really debating what their role is, even on very small matters. Parking regulations. Hey, the people in my community, my ward want X. Yeah, they want more parking regulations, but I really don't think we should have more parking regulations. And so I'm undecided how to vote. And I mean, they'll say that at a meeting. And so when I mean that's a real debate, that's a real debate that happens every day in America. And it's an important debate because you kind of figure, well, maybe they know better than I do. You know, they elected me. I should just do what they want me to do. But on other issues, maybe you should just use your judgment. So his thoughts on this, I've read some of Burke. He's got some good thoughts on that argument that no, you're a representative. You know, you put yourself out there to be elected, and they should just trust you to do it and throw you out if you don't do it right at the next election.
He kind of concludes this section on Burke's life as a whole by saying the rest of his political career achieved certain economical reforms, but his reform of the East India Company was opposed by the king, and his last years were very unhappy. He'd actually bought an estate for his son on a mortgage that he struggled to pay throughout the end of his life, and his son even died in 1794, and Burke died in 1797, so really all of his efforts towards the end of his life were sort of wasted. There's a good quote, or a certain set of quotes here at the end. He says he was an accomplished philosopher, but he was also a politician, and he knew as well as Cicero that in politics, rhetorical effectiveness is more important than analytical precision. He was not effective in person. He emptied the House of Commons by delivering speeches that were intended for publication and ill-adapted to their audience. They bored his hearers, but he mostly wrote like an angel. So could not speak very well, but could write very well. And that is the majority of where his political thoughts come from here.
And you'd think if you're a really good writer, your delivery, I mean, the spoken word would do as well, but I guess it depends on
Evidently
how you read
not.
it. If you're just standing there reading, monotone, I guess it would make a difference.
That is true. We then get into Burke's reflections on the French Revolution itself. And of course, this work was titled The Reflections on the Revolution in France, and is Burke's best known and most formidable attack on the French revolutionaries. It was published in November 1790, which was very soon after the beginning of the revolution, with the fall of the Bastille on July 14th, 1789. So very, very soon after it actually started.
Yeah, very impressive with his predictions. You know, Mr. Rand, did I say his name? Yeah, Ryan. It makes the argument that maybe anybody of reasonable intelligence and education would have guessed that this was going to happen this way. Meaning they're going to turn on themselves and lots of death and destruction to be followed by a dictator. But that was not commonly thought of as it was happening, especially that early on. And so that kind of gives what he wrote about them more weight in my mind, and I think in a lot of people's minds, that this guy actually understood what this revolution was about. And because he understood it so well, he knew what was going to happen more than the people that were participating in it did, which it's just fascinating. And it kind of, sometimes maybe you just get lucky and you guess right. But the reasons he gave for it, it's going to end up this way, was exactly right. They just unmoored themselves from any sense of societal cohesion or any rules. And if you empower a mob and you have no rules restricting what they're going to do, it's going to end badly most of the time.
Exactly. Now, this writing was actually provoked by a sermon delivered by Reverend Richard Price, which he argued that a rational man would regard all mankind as his fellow countrymen and be a cosmopolitan, not a nationalist. He asserts that governments exist to protect our rights, and one of these rights is to hold our leaders accountable. So this was a sermon that was sort of in support of the French Revolution. This idea that we need to hold our leaders accountable, and what the French are doing is good. And it no way will end badly.
Right. Well, all the people of the world unite.
Yes,
You know,
exactly.
that ends up becoming similar to a communist manifesto, you know, for all the revolutionaries of the world.
Yeah.
It's a precursor to all that nonsense.
Yeah. But he says at the time, Burke's attack on the revolution was kind of surprising. He was somewhat known as being a critic of the government and the system of royal influence, but he was absolutely no defender of divine right or absolute monarchy. He really despised both of those things. You would kind of imagine he would be on the French revolutionary side this early on in the revolution. He says his ideal was balanced constitutional monarchy in which a strong legislative holds an uncorrupted executive in check. He was therefore sympathetic to the revolution in the beginning, but soon realized that the French wanted more than just what the Glorious Revolution had done for England. All of these utopian ideals, this kind of...
I think he was supportive of the reforms.
Yes.
Not the revolution at all. I don't think he was supportive because there were reforms that led to the revolution. Like there was some liberating that the king, I would have to remember, the king had allowed some representation and some division of power and authority, thinking that would cool down the push to get rid of the monarchy altogether, and it just did not work, and then they deposed him. So I guess it depends on what you mean by the start of the revolution.
Sure. Yes.
Yeah.
He then goes on to say that the Reflections is very difficult, this work. He says it has a debating speech with theoretical claims kind of offered as asides, but it has several factual issues. Sure. Actually, he kind of exaggerated things early on in the Revolution, and it was literarily, that's a hard word to say, literarily disorganized, but it was aimed to prevent the English from following in the French footsteps. It was very much the work of a politician,
right.
Not necessarily, political theory work, but more so just a call for the English to pay attention to what's going on here,
right.
and not do the same thing.
An advocate.
Yes, exactly.
Without, not a philosophy, a treatise.
Sure. He goes on to say that a society is a contract between the living and the dead for all goodness and virtue in which we can sustain one another over a very long history. He says it is a partnership in all science, a partnership in all art, a partnership in every virtue and all perfection. As the ends of such a partnership cannot be obtained in many generations, it becomes a partnership not only between those who are living, but also between those who are living, those who are dead, and those who are to be born. So this idea that, a society is not just who is with you at the current time. It is who has created this thing for you, who has passed it down, who is still yet to come. What are you doing to maintain the society for all of these generations?
Yeah, and that's the way our society has been through my entire lifetime until recently.
Really?
You'd often hear, especially like it's not, in our area of the world, it's more common, but like Veterans Days, celebrations where you recognize the people that sacrifice so much for the liberties that you have now, and then you're pledged to keep them, for the future generations. So that's been a very common theme and understanding of what we have, and we've inherited. I remember very, very young, the bicentennial was in 76, so I was 6 years old, and, the years after that, you have that philosophy, but I don't see, you see a lot of criticism of what our parents and grandparents and great-grandparents and so on created, that we inherited. And his view of this and his description of it is pretty interesting. It's not just an agreement among the living, but also an agreement of the living with the dead, the people that bestowed this upon us, that, we've been granted a gift, such as it is. And then, we have a duty to the people that aren't even born yet to leave it hopefully better than it was when we inherited. So that's a common theme that we have in America, but I think we're getting a little bit away from that as well.
He says that societies are held together by inarticulate habits of belief and affection, and these he calls prejudices.
Right.
Of course, not with the bad connotation that it has now, but just these ideas that we all have in common. What do we believe? Prejudice, of course, means before judgment, just
right.
things that we innately have as a society. And he says, recreating society ab initio is beyond reason. And he says here on page 627, disrupting our beliefs, expectations, and habits of obedience and cooperation easily gets out of hand and produces disastrous and murderous results. Matters have to be very bad indeed to justify taking that risk. The American Revolution was dangerous because it was not wholly clear that it would not descend into anarchy, but far from mad, because it was intended as a restoration of old liberties, not as a prelude to wholesale social reconstruction. The French Revolution was a utopian project certain to end in catastrophe.
Yes.
So again, going back to that idea of Locke, you can get rid of the government while keeping the people. The French decided we will get rid of the government and all of the society of the people and just make something from scratch. Of course, Burke realized that is impossible. You cannot do that. You are crazy.
Right.
Just to summarize, that's a direct quote from Burke. Yes, that's what I just said.
Crazy.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Probably wouldn't be surprised.
It would be an English accent.
Yes.
And my current philosophy going forward is that we need to have a restoration of this country, similar to what he's talking about. Like the American Revolution was a restoration of their individual rights under the then Constitution or the Crown or whatever. And I think we need that and a return to normalcy. That's my new themes. Anyway, so that's my thoughts on that. I think it's absolutely right. Once you say, hey, I want to create everything new. It's the old conservative impulse. So if it was, I forget, it might even been Burke. It's Burke's era that somebody told a story about two gentlemen walking along a farm road, and they see a fence. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere, and the liberal says, "Oh, fences are terrible. They just keep people from freedom. Let's tear down the fence." And the conservative says, "Maybe we should see why they built the fence in the first place. There could be something, bad on the other side of that fence." And that Burkean thought of, hey, let's not just tear everything down just to tear it down. Maybe there's a good reason for it to be this way, but if there's not, then we absolutely should change it incrementally, not just throw everything out. And he's right.
Yeah,
If
exactly.
If you do what the French did, you're going to get a lot of death.
Oh, absolutely.
Yep.
He used 3 arguments in attacking the French Revolution. The first was very utilitarian. He says revolutions are costly in terms of human happiness. People's ideas about what will make them happy are flexible, and no person needs to liberate another because he thinks the other is unhappy. He makes the example of like a farmer and like some man in a castle, and he's like, well, the man in the castle is looking down on the farmer. Oh, how terrible he is, just toiling away. And the farmer looks up at the man in the castle, how terrible he is, not actually producing anything, but thoughts. And so it's just like, very.
But it makes the point the farmer's not trying to liberate the intellectual.
Yes.
It's always the intellectual. I want to liberate these people. From what? Because they could sit around in a room and talk about nothing. Who's going to milk the cow?
Going back to what you said earlier, he says reform is best done gradually to allow people to acclimate to a new status quo and a new happiness. This idea if we just want to change everything that somebody else is doing, that change is not gonna stick. You have to get them used to a new status quo and then keep changing from there very gradually. He also says that the universe is governed by a divinely ordained natural law, and humans are intended to be regulated by this. We must therefore do what is appropriate to our condition and live in a happy and virtuous life, not upend our world with deranged intellectuals. So this idea of, everything is, according to a plan. If we're going against this plan, there's something wrong here. That's the second argument. And his third argument.
Wait a second. We got to start writing these band names now because I think Deranged Intellectuals is a great
band name.
Punk rock band name.
That is fantastic.
You know what we should do?
What should we do?
The next T-shirt. We already designed one, but haven't.
We haven't gotten a winner. By the way, you can win a free T-shirt. Yeah. Leave an interesting review. Any podcast platform. Win a free T-shirt.
I think for the next season, we should have a fake. Concert T-shirt, well, you won't know the rep. Well, maybe you would. Lollapalooza was big when I was young, and they had like Pearl Jam and Jane's Addiction. I don't know if those all bands were in it, but they had all these bands in it. And so they have a T-shirt with all the band names and tour dates.
Yes,
I think we should have. Instead of tour dates, it would be our dates of our podcast for next season. And then have a bunch of fictitious band names and make it like it looks like. And it'll be Unlimited Opinions World Tour 2023.
Yeah, there we go.
And then so Deranged Intellectuals would be one of the bands.
That's fantastic. Yes, we should do that.
I probably should have waited till after we were done with the recording for that idea. But.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Back to Burke.
I support any author who ever refers to the leftists as deranged intellectuals. That's just my default.
That's pretty great. Yes. He was also very attached to traditional religious forms. This is his third argument here. He says religion is an indispensable support for public morality. Societies function better when based on religious conviction, and the revolution was therefore a blasphemous undertaking because the humans had arrogated themselves the powers of social construction and destruction that belonged to God alone. So not just the doing away with religion, as of course the French were doing, but this idea that we are somehow above all morality and above all of this divine plan to just make something new from scratch.
Right.
Just that idea is entirely blasphemous. You're making yourself God in that instance.
Well, they did anyway. They made their own religion.
That is true.
And we see it today with these climate activists, like, referencing Gaia and all this other kind of nonsense.
True.
Yeah,
Very true.
it keeps getting colder. We're going to start praying to Gaia to warm up the place. The Earth is not warming currently. I don't know if anybody noticed that. Last 20 years, I don't think we've had any warming. Do you notice that?
I can't say I have.
Yeah, you know why you haven't noticed it? You haven't noticed it because they don't report on on the lack of change on the overall temperature of the planet. Been 2 days. It's been your entire lifetime.
Yes.
There's been no increase in
so?
global temperatures. I know so. Oh. It's just the reality of it. They call it the Great Pause.
Of course.
It's a pause.
Naturally.
Yes.
We then move on to Burke in the modern idea of revolution. He starts out by saying that Burke really invented the modern idea of revolution. He says there were two forms of classical revolution, this good return to first principles, and the other form of just a simple catastrophe. You're either returning to something that was previous or you're just devolving into anarchy. Those are the two types of revolution. But the modern idea is that the revolution itself is the interconnected social, economic, intellectual, and political events that stem from a political upheaval. So, the classical idea is just whatever, this political turn is, either this return to something good or anarchy. But the modern definition is, of course, everything that comes along with it, not just that political action. But Burke expected that the revolution would end with the destruction of the French church, the execution of the king and queen, large-scale massacre, and the restoration of order by a military dictator, which, of course, is exactly what happens.
Yes.
And again, you mentioned earlier, but he kind of says the point, anyone with a knowledge of history or current events would have seen this. I don't think that's true.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, perhaps. It's hard to say, but he's the one that was really prominent in making those predictions explicitly and the reasons why.
Yeah.
And I don't know that there were other things. There's a reason why we're reading about Burke.
Yeah.
Mainly. Because it was part of a group, and there was other authors during that time, but he's the most prominent one that would be considered conservatives. And the conservative movement, the modern conservative movement, started as opposition to the French Revolution.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't know that.
That's volume 1 of the 4 volumes of great conservative thought.
Fascinating. That's a big 4-volume set he has in the basement.
But chugging slowly through it.
But Burke set this positive image of a functioning polity against the negative image of pure destruction, kind of, comparing, what we should and shouldn't do. Of course, the pure destruction is what the French Revolution became. But he kind of acknowledges that the state collapsed easily. It was bankrupt and vulnerable to the discontent of the people, and the French church structure had become a device for extracting money and services. So he's saying it's not entirely unpredictable that this would have happened. I don't think he makes the argument that the French Revolution was preventable, in the political upheaval. But I think everything that followed from that, need not have happened. I think he acknowledged that France was due for what America had done or for what England had done, in the Glorious Revolution and things like that. But everything that came with the French Revolution was not what should have happened.
Yeah, I generally would agree with that. Although the king and his supporters, if they knew what was coming, they would have brutally repressed them.
Probably, yeah. Oh, absolutely.
More.
yeah.
And because, I don't think they realized the danger until it was too late.
Yeah.
And because there were concessions made initially by the king, and the king's power at the time, if I remember correctly, I remember I read a biography of Robespierre, and I think the king's position was really tenuous in the sense that there were a lot of, I don't know what you call them, lords or princes, or in this kind of somewhat feudal state. He didn't have a complete control over the army, or the armed forces to really have an organized central state that would go against the mob and the revolutionaries. It was very disparate interests, and if he knew what was coming, maybe he would have, with a heavier hand, consolidated his forces and cracked down even more. Than it was just such a corrupt and ineffective system I think Burke's right that it would have failed under its own weight just because the way they had it, with absent some other type of reform.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. Some sort of reform was due, but this horrible French Revolution was not what France needed.
Correct.
Yes.
Right.
Put it simply, yes. Right. He also doesn't answer the question of why the habits that keep us obedient work so effectively so much of the time and break down so swiftly on the rare occasions they do. He's looking at these societies. There's all kinds of habits that we do just as a society, and they function properly, 99% of the time. But then in these instances of revolution, especially violent revolution, they're just gone like that.
Yes.
And it's like, well, it doesn't answer why that is. Why do you think that is?
I would have not had a guess, and I'm going to mention my least favorite subject, which I keep talking about, COVID.
Of course.
I would have never guessed that we could have flipped a switch and shut down our entire society, for 15 days, and then it went on forever. But once you change the basics, the basic role that everybody has relative to each other, if you just say all deals are off, let's put it this way: the next likely, as I see it, the next possible, not likely, I guess, the next possible crisis of that nature will be a complete seizing up of the American currency. So like into too much detail, like I said, China's trying to buy oil using how do you say their currency, yuan or whatever, instead of using the dollar. So the dollar is a reserve currency, and that provides us with a certain stability with our entire society. And if we're not the reserve currency of everything else, it kind of falls down on a house of cards. And there have been financial crises in the American history, and most of the time it was before we had a central bank, because we had different state banks, and there would be a panic or there'd be a run on the bank, so to speak. There's a run on banks during the Great Depression too. But if that happens, let's say the American dollar currency loses value. First of all, most people don't even have paper dollars. It's all electronic. So what does that even mean? How does it, all of us, if that system breaks, what do we have? What is our society, and how will people react? And then all of a sudden everybody has to make decisions. They have to answer questions that they never considered, and they have to do it right now. And so how is our society going to react? And what if somebody decides, say there's a group of people in Washington, D.C. that say, well, because of this crisis, we have to suspend the Constitution, and now General so-and-so is in charge for the next 60 days. And he has the loyalty of most of the armed forces. Well, what do we do at that point? What do we do out in Missouri? Do we just say, okay? Do we fight that? How do we even fight that? And so it can happen. And if it happens that quick. It can happen tomorrow. Like, let's say tomorrow we wake up and there's a group of generals that say, we're tired. They just passed a $1.7 trillion spending package. We're $31 trillion in debt. We can't even pay our bills. We're tired of this. They've usurped the Constitution. The Supreme Court has abused our Constitution long enough. We're going to restore constitutional order starting today, and we're in charge. And they have, say, 80% of the armed forces with them. What are we going to do about that? There's nothing we can do about that. And that's a revolution. So maybe we fight them. I don't know. But it can happen like that.
I don't know. I feel like I'd agree with those revolutionaries.
That's the problem, because you get half of the people that will agree with it, and the other half, maybe disagree with it. But how many of those people would actually fight it? And then what about the people that are principled and say, well, I agree with everything they're saying, but their means are kind of a little heavy-handed. Are you really going to risk your life for that? Your kids' lives? And what if they start rounding up people and killing them? And what if there's like a bunch of really bad people that we all hate? I can think of examples, I guess. Right now the persona non grata is Kanye West. What if they grab Kanye West or some other people that everybody so-called hates right now? It starts executing them publicly. I mean, like the French Revolution. If there's somebody that everybody just kind of hates, I don't even want to say anybody. I don't think most people hate Kanye. I think most people, feel bad for him. But let's pick somebody else. The audience member can pick somebody that, I hate that person. And if there was a crowd of people cheering that person's beheading by guillotine, who's going to step into the breach and stop it? All rules are off at that point. There's no police force. There's nothing. And so that's how it happens. It's like it happens immediately.
Interesting. I've never thought about it like that.
Oh yeah. I mean, when you talk about revolution, that's what you're talking about. No rules. No rules. Yeah. And you have essentially warlords, which would be over here locally. The biggest warlord would be probably the sheriff, because he has an organized group that would be loyal to him to a degree. They're all armed, and they have uniforms and rank, and they have command and control. You have other police departments within the county. There's a Army engineering company, I think, down the street. So that they would be there, but what are they going to do? Yeah, they don't even. Most of them aren't even from here. Maybe they go back home. I don't know. Maybe they just secure their fenced-in border. But so they would. Our local law enforcement probably would protect us from people encroaching upon us. But we have interstates coming through here. Are we going to stop traffic? Are we going to let people pass through? It depends on how big of a crisis it is. Are we going to let people come south across the Merrimack River? Without a checkpoint? Probably not. We're probably not going to let people get off the Arnold exit. Yeah. We're going to have a checkpoint there. And if you don't live here, what are you doing here? And it would happen immediately. If there's a civil unrest, it's going to be locked down immediately. And how are you going to get your food? All of a sudden, the Altoffs are sitting pretty. I shouldn't mention names. We're going to edit that out. But that's a prominent farmers in the area. And hard-working family, great people. But, they have food, because they grow their own food. But anyway, I did get a rant in.
You did get a rant, and that was a good rant. I'm also now picturing a bunch of 4-star generals coming together and calling together all the army for the express purpose of just killing Kanye West. I think that's just a good image to think about. Not that I want it to happen, but it's just a funny.
Well, I was trying to give an example because what you do
is you pick a target that everybody hates.
You pick a target everybody hates, and you well, I mean, one of them would be Trump, but he's a lightning rod, and he has his own supporters, so it could work to a point, but you'd radicalize his opponents. And he has almost a religious following. Yeah,
it'd have to be like somebody like like Mitch McConnell, like.
He is the most hated politician.
That's what I'm thinking, because it's like because
I mean, a lot of Republicans that would just shrug.
Be like, yeah, okay, because that's what I'm thinking. It's like he's hated by the left for sure, but he's not really liked by the right. He's just kind of there.
He polls at like 15%, but he got reelected. I don't know how that happens. He's brilliant in his own way
somehow. Yeah,
but that's how you do it. You'd have to. Well, what you do is the crisis comes and you have to pick the target, like you said. And you have to demonize them so everybody hates them. And they're the blame for it. We just have to get these people out of the way. We'll give them a trial. They give them a trial. And everybody knows what the outcome of the trial is before it begins.
Yes.
And because you want to act like you have due process. And then you execute them. And then it's like, okay, well, these people were just as bad. Yeah. All right, round them up. And you keep everybody, cheering the spectacle.
True. Well, that was Burke. I don't really know how we got there, but
we got there because Burke was warning about these dangers. Yes. You have to keep, even if you want to change, a lot of injustice in a society. You can't just throw everything out at once. You have to go through step by step. And I know people don't want to endure injustice for a day longer than they have to. I get that, and I sympathize with it. But there's always disagreements on what is injustice and what is just. But even if we agree on everything that's unjust, we have to figure out how to go about it, and we should do it in a reasoned manner, in a systematic manner, rather than just throwing out all the rules all at once. Sure. Because once you do that, then it's like The Purge. The movie.
Yes, I understood the reference. We're now moving on to Joseph de Maistre, who had some interesting ideas, somewhat different than Burke, but sort of in the same vein. He was born in 1753 and died in 1821 and spent the majority of his life in diplomatic service. But like Burke, he approved some of the first steps of reform and saw the later actions as steps toward disaster. He published his own Considerations sur la France, claiming that the revolution was an act of divine punishment. He says that mankind is so wicked that God might properly punish us at any time. He says we should be happy. We should not complain about his punishment, but be grateful when it doesn't happen.
Right.
So just living in a state of we always deserve punishment.
We're so wicked we have no grounds to complain.
Yes, exactly.
That's a brilliant thought, which reminds me of I had a law school professor. There was criminal law, and students, we were talking about death penalty, and a student says, well, I'm against the death penalty because it's racially discriminatory because a disproportionate number of African Americans are executed. And so the professor said, you know what the solution to that is? And he says, no. He says, you kill more white people.
Yeah.
I
saw that going.
So we got to make sure we focus on killing more. We have to execute more white murders. And then is your problem solved? Yes. If we kill more white people, are your issues with the death penalty resolved? Well, no, because blah, 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 blah.
Yes.
So it was a really kind of a funny exchange.
That is funny.
Yeah.
But then he moves on to this idea that he wanted authority to work on our will by breaking the will to resist. He says God is an absolute ruler whose decrees are unscrutable and whose operations are terrifying. And so France, therefore, needed an absolute monarch supported by an infallible pope. He says authority must be unchallengeable and power must be felt in the bowels and not the head, something that is just felt and not really thought of, theoretically. Because man is a creature of passion, and destruction is the rational consequence of unleashed passions. So we just have to keep everybody in check, break their wills, just make them feel the power. But he says this started a train of thought with the counter-enlightenment that surfaced a century later and became, interestingly, Italian fascism. Kind of drew a lot on Joseph de Maistre. But an interesting and very different approach from Burke. Burke saying, we do need some sort of change, and it's good to have an opportunity for change. Joseph de Maistre says, no, beat them into submission, essentially, which is, I don't think that's the approach we should use. I think that's the approach that the French monarchy started to use and then quickly failed.
Yes.
But
yeah, and I one thing that caught my eye in this chapter was he mentions that train of thought eventually passed into fascism. And he says, though not into the fascism of Benito Mussolini himself, who thought of himself as a man of the left in his own way.
Yes.
Fascism is of the left. Fascism is the left. It is not conservative. And so somebody needs to educate this author that fascism and socialism and all these despots are all of the left.
Can you elaborate on that?
What do you mean?
Do you want to go on a rant about how fascism is a product? Because I've always heard that it's of the right, and I know it's not, but I want to hear your thoughts.
They say it's the right. What is? It's all about state control.
Yes.
So the right in America is about personal, individual rights and individual responsibilities, and a freedom from government intrusion unless absolutely necessary.
Yes.
And that's generally the synopsis of it. We believe in the Bill of Rights. We believe in limited government. We believe in federalism, which means the government can't act quickly on anything unless it's a true emergency that we all have an agreement on. And we have God-given rights that are separate from any government. Nobody gives it to us. We have it when we're born. We have it before we're born, when we're before birth. Once we're created, we have those rights. Fascism is about the government controlling everything. It's about the government running the trains on time. That was Mussolini's big thing. He got the trains to run on time. He ran government, and it's about governmental control. It's just a different form of socialism. It's socialism with a nationalist bent, saying we are a people that are a great people, and everybody else sucks, and we're gonna have the government involved in almost every aspect of the economy, so that we can get it all working for our nation. To benefit our nation. Okay, so it's just national socialism, which is exactly what Nazism is. It's national socialists. So when anybody says, oh, well, that's a right-wing fascist, well, what's right-wing about him? Because he wants to rule as a dictator and have nobody have any authority other than him? How is that right-wing?
Yeah.
I mean, currently right-wing thought being that we should have individual freedom, individual rights. So that's the right. The left is always about limits on our authority, limits on our personal authority, limits on our freedom. They want to amend the First Amendment so we don't have freedom of speech, because hate speech and all that stuff.
I think a lot of it comes from this idea that that fascism is of the right, just comes from that sort of nationalist bend, because I think a lot more people on the right are just more proud of their country.
Correct.
And are just, more, rooted in those sorts of values, and this is something we need to preserve.
Correct.
And so that just gets turned into, oh, well, big mean dictator also says he loves his country.
Correct.
These people say they love their country, therefore it is right wing.
Right.
And I don't think it was this book.
Because American conservatives wave flags, and so do the Nazis. That's the connection. That's really what it is.
Yes.
Oh, well, you're a nationalist, so you must be a fascist. No, I believe the United States is the best country that's ever been created, even today with all its defects. And I'm a nationalist. I believe we should have fixed borders, and we shouldn't let anybody in. For right now, nobody comes in. Except for if you're on vacation. And you better damn well leave on time. Okay? You miss your flight, you're going to be waiting in a cell. I mean, that's my view. Maybe not a cell, but certainly you're not leaving the airport.
Sure.
I mean, you're gonna have to wait, and you're here by permission, and so that's considered right wing and fascist, but it's not. It is nationalist because I believe in a nation, and if we don't have control of our borders, or we don't have, because we have to, in a republic, it's important to have the people that are here that are making the decisions are citizens. And if you don't have a citizen or citizenship, you have no nation, and you have no individual rights, you have no constitution. So I'm sorry, what was the point? I was went on a complete rant. I'm trying to think what
we were talking about Joseph de Maistre, and then that came into fascism, and we've been on this tangent.
Why
yes, because he mentioned yes. There's one thing
they're never of the right.
Yes.
And then they say, well, the fascists fought the communists. Well, you know what? It's like the conservatives are the NFC. And in football, and the people on the left are the AFC. Well, the communists versus the Nazis is just everybody on the AFC. They're fighting in their league.
Yes,
they're all of the left. So the fascists are just a different type of socialists than the communists, and the communists are just fascists who think they're going to share stuff later, I guess. I mean, they're all the same. They're just horrible people, all of them. Just the socialists, the Nazis, and the communists.
I was going to share stuff later.
Yeah, that's what the communism is. The communism is, we're going to take all of your stuff, and we think we're going to share it with everybody later. Okay? We really believe that we're going to share it with everybody once the time is right.
Yes.
And devout communists, because it is a religion, devout communists really believe that,
yes,
right? But they're never going to do it. So that's the difference between a socialist and a Nazi and a communist. Yes. It's very a Nazi is a particular type of fascist. So let's just talk about fascists, socialists, and communists. So there's fascists are just socialists who really like their own country, and they don't want to help any other socialists in the world. That's what a fascist is,
yes.
Okay? A socialist is, give us all the stuff, and we'll tell you how to spend it and how to do with it. And communists are the same thing, except for eventually we're going to share it with everybody. That's it. That's the nutshell definition, fascist, socialist, communist, and they're all of the left, every last one of them. Because if a dictator was of the right, what would he do? He would do what Washington did, which is walk away from it.
Yes,
because he doesn't, as a person on the right, doesn't believe that you have the right to rule over someone. So if you're of the right, if you believe in individual rights, you're not going to be the guy in charge of a totalitarian government by definition.
Yes. We should get back to Thomas Paine. I will mention one more thing. I don't think it was in this book, but it was something else I saw.
And you purposely got me on that rant. You did that on purpose.
It was good. It was a good rant. But there was this quote I saw, fascism is the most misunderstood, political doctrine of the modern age. Because, I see everywhere, if people say, hey, maybe we shouldn't, have, drag queen story time. You're a right-wing fascist. You just don't want people to live their own lives, blah, 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 blah. You want to control everybody. It's just so overused. It's become the word that everybody uses to describe the things that they don't like.
Correct. And at some point, we're just gonna own it. And we're just going to start beating these people up. We're just going to start. Yes. Where did this come from? This comes from if they show it. Like if I had young kids and some drag queen showed up at my kid's library, to put on a show, boy, I'm just glad I don't have young kids because I'd probably be going to jail that day. Actually, I don't know. I don't know if I would in this town, you know.
In this town, yeah.
But we have friends that have taken children to drag queen story hours, and I had to bite my tongue when that came up. You know, they were so proud of themselves. Oh, you got to be kidding me. You know,
moving on.
I almost offered to do a background check on the drag queen because you know he's got priors.
Oh, most certainly. Moving on to Thomas Paine.
So
my God. Moving on to Thomas Paine.
We're one day after Christmas. So,
it is December 26th.
I'll share the mall Santa Claus theory.
Yes,
Have I shared that?
You told me, not on the podcast.
On the podcast. So I have a theory, and it's defamatory to all these mall Santa Clauses. But my theory is, what man in their right mind would be paid any sum of money, let alone however little they're getting paid to be a mall Santa Claus, so that kids can sit on your lap and tell you what they want for Christmas? I don't even want to be in the mall a month before Christmas, but I didn't even go this. I don't think I've been to the mall in months. But so my theory is that they must have something wrong with them, one way or the other, that they would be willing to take that job. And now let's switch over to the drag queen story hours, where you want to read stories to somebody else's kid in the library. What dude wants to do that? Okay. So now you've gotten beyond just having some kids sit on your lap. Now you're going to read them a book. and on top of that, you're going to wear a dress, high heels, and makeup. And I've never put on a dress, high heels, and makeup, but I understand that it's not easy to do that makeup. It takes time.
Yes.
Right? And it's expensive. Because you don't have you're not just walking in your jeans and a t-shirt. You have to buy the outfit, put it on and put on makeup, so that some kid can sit on your lap, so that you can read to them. What person does that for somebody that's not their kid and you're not a librarian? And so my theory is that they all have priors.
Good thoughts.
Yes.
Thomas Paine. We are moving on. We are putting that 20 minutes or whatever that was of rant behind us. Thomas Paine was born in Norfolk in 1737 and arrived in America in 1774, and he published the pamphlet Common Sense in 1776, which sold 150,000 copies and was definitely the most successful pamphlet of its time. He says it begins with the famous lines, "These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in this crisis, shrink from the service of his country, but he that stands it now deserves the love and thanks of man and women." It was read to Washington's troops before they scored the first victory of the war at Trenton on December 26, 1776. So very prominent in American history.
Yes.
But he claimed to be a citizen of the world. He actually returned to England in 1787 and fled to Paris in 1791. And he was actually made a French citizen and given a seat in the National Convention, but was later jailed during the Terror, and only lived because the chalk mark for execution was written on the wrong door. So he was nearly executed, but they were so disorganized that they placed the chalk mark on the wrong door, and he lived.
I don't know if it was disorganization. They just were killing so many people.
That is true.
You know, it's like mistakes are made, you know. It's hard to keep up.
Yeah, there's too many people in these cells.
And they're marking it with chalk. You know what that means? That means it's easy to erase and mark it a different color or number the next day.
Yes.
Because they're killing so many people.
Yeah, exactly.
Wait, who gets fed breakfast and who dies? Let's see. We marked the dead people, the execution, the victims of execution in white chalk, but the guys that get breakfast have blue chalk. And then the guy goes down there. Wait, which one? Is it blue?
Blue.
Or is it white?
Blue.
All right. You people in blue, come to me. You're going to get executed. I think that's how Thomas Paine. That is a reenactment of how Thomas Paine survived the terrors.
That's great.
And what nut would have accepted a role in the French Assembly? I mean, come on. I mean, he had to know by then.
Yeah.
I mean, he wrote a great pamphlet and a good thinker and all that kind of stuff, inspirational. But who does that?
Yeah, exactly.
He gets rounded up and
actually
and then he didn't even leave.
He didn't even leave. He didn't return to America until 1802. But
That's
was reviled.
crazy.
Yeah, he was. But he was reviled for his anti-Christian tract, "The Age of Reason," and lived in obscurity and poverty until his death in 1807.
Oh, there was some justice.
But his most prominent, work on the French Revolution was *The Rights of Man*, which contains his responses to Burke. He says society is almost always a blessing and government is a necessary evil. And so he argued for a minimalist state that is needed to safeguard commerce and industry and provide for those who cannot provide for themselves. So some sort of welfare state, but minimal, just a government that exists as a necessary evil for these good purposes.
Yeah, but then he defines welfare state as like some overarching scheme that would require huge transfers of wealth and governmental control.
Yeah. He actually defended the Enlightenment idea of revolution. He says, government matters less than our rulers say it does, and many tasks that the government levies taxes for are unnecessary, and most necessary taxes can be performed by independent people better, which I agree with him 100% there. He also saw hereditary rule as absurd. He says the only rational way to choose a ruling elite was some form of electoral process. So good enough so far. I agree with him there.
He reminds me of the present day libertarians. You know but their real overarching philosophy is legalize dope, and then I want a complete and total welfare system safety net so I don't have to work again.
Yes,
I'm a libertarian. The only thing libertarian is they're libertine. And I want to have sex with whatever and do anything and smoke pot all day, but the government controls everything else. I'm a libertarian.
Thank you for that.
I was going to rant today.
I told you. I told you it happened. He also upheld universal human rights. He says human equality and rationality are given, and so government must be by consent. Humans have this innate powers of reason and things like that. Agree with him there. He also saw the violence of the revolutionaries as the effect of a sudden overcoming of a pre-existent violent repression. He says Burke's blame of the revolutionaries should really be placed on the previous monarchs, but he does not sort of explain the air of carnival around the revolution. He has a good quote here on page 642. He says, something close to hysterical sadism seems often to have seized the mob, as though the breach of old taboos liberated some deep and long-repressed urge to perpetrate violence for its own sake. That, again, is something that characterizes modern rioting as much as it did the riots of the 18th century. Plaintive commenters wonder why rioters and looters wreck their own neighborhoods, but fail to acknowledge that submitting to the disciplines of self-restraint is hard work, and that violence and cruelty are fun. I don't know if you agree with that or not, but I think it is something that we've definitely seen, especially in a lot of these, a lot of the Antifa riots in the summer of, 2020 at this point, where it's just people going around smashing stores in communities that largely agreed with their own values, interestingly. But it was, just seems like they were having a lot of fun with it.
Well, I mean, most people don't recognize that most criminals have fun while they commit crimes. Most murderers enjoy it. Most burglars enjoy the thrill. People that break into our cars in our subdivision get a kick out of it. Yeah. And people don't appreciate that. They don't understand that. And I remember prosecuting a murderer, and I remember mentioning in a closing argument that he enjoyed it. Yeah. And I recognized that I needed to kind of change that argument as some of the jurors were clearly shocked by the concept this person enjoyed killing. I mean, they eventually understood that he was guilty and all that kind of stuff. But I don't think people that are familiar with the criminal justice system and don't deal with these people don't really get that a lot of criminals, a lot of crime. So a mob is just a lot of criminals. It's just a group gathering of criminals. And a mob, you can get spun up into it. Because it becomes like a fair or a festival. As we see in the videos of the, after the George Floyd stuff and the Black Lives Matter riots, they have drums out there, and musicians and flags, and it's like a festival of violence and property damage. And it's no different than it's human nature. You get spun around on it, and you get hyped up, and you're not thinking, oh, this is some person that put their life in a business for the last 20 years, and I've just cleaned them out. Yeah. And they have insurance.
Well, I mean, they had so many signs that I saw. Black-owned business. Do not, loot. Correct. Do not burn down. Saying, I am part of this in a way. I am essentially what you should be fighting for here. And then the buildings burned down the next day. So.
Yeah, but I think, it was terrible. Yes. Terrible, but it's not a surprise to a cynic like me. Sure. It's what's going to happen if you have a controversial issue that you think there might be a spark, the police can't back off the area and allow them room. What do they say? Room to there was one politician that had a famous quote.
I'm not sure.
They need a room to exercise their anger or something along those lines. And that's the worst thing you do because you're just giving permission. Yeah, you're just giving permission.
Exactly. He goes on to say that every generation has a natural, indefensible right to decide for itself what form of government to live under. And this is where he attacks Burke's idea that we're sort of a society as, the past and the present. Right. He says the belief that someone in the past had that right to decide what sort of society to live under and later people don't is irrational. So he says we should all have that ability. He says if any government is legitimate, it must trace its institution to the free choice of whoever set it up. Subjects based on consent must recover their or based on conquest, must recover their liberty if they can. If you were just conquered, you have some sort of right to reclaim your previous liberty.
Yeah, you're just imprisoned.
Yeah,
and I think his turn of phrase was good when he's attacking Burke's theory that we owe a debt to their predecessors. He said that by Burke's theory, the dead are just governing the living. Yeah, there's some truth.
There's some truth to that. I don't know if I necessarily agree with Payne entirely here, but it is the case that we can't just accept whatever was written 200 years ago to be right today. There are some changes that need to be made. He says that he acknowledges that people must give up many natural rights when governments are set up, but the rights that we can exercise by our own unaided efforts are never given up. If we can do this ourselves, there's no point for the government to take that from us, essentially. He says there's never a reason to sort of ban intellectual and religious liberty, as all a man needs to speculate about the universe is non-interference. All you need is for the government to just back up, and then he'll take care of it himself. And so an established church is therefore wrong. But he also says that most rights fall into a gray area of whether we can do it by ourselves and whether we need the government's help. Things like inheritance and things like that. What sort of role government has in contracts, all that sort of economic stuff. But he agreed with Burke that the French Revolution was a novelty. It was both a political and social revolution and was committed to an idea of progress, combining moral with political happiness and national prosperity. So this is a revolution unlike anything we've ever seen. He says there had now been two revolutions where its principles were universal, while past revolutions had just been changes in government personnel. Of course, talking about the American Revolution and the French Revolution, arguing on universal principles and not just get rid of this bad government.
Right.
He then kind of concludes that he believed that the English population could use a similar revolution. He particularly criticized the established church. He also makes the interesting point that toleration is just as despotic as denial of toleration. He says the government has no more right to give permission of practice of faith than it had to deny, which I think is spot on. I don't know why we need, why does the government have anything to say about practice of religion? But I don't know. You look like you might have something else to say.
Well, I think it might overstate it.
Sure.
I mean, if you're just talking about tolerating religion, then it should be tolerated. But I think some of what he's saying is really what this new conservative movement is talking about now. That if you just tolerate all sorts of evil things, then that's a form of tyranny too, because you have to have some sort of standards, and if the government is tolerating it, then it's making it accessible to everybody.
Sure.
It's almost promoting it, but but just under the guise of toleration, and so I think Payne makes a point on that, because it's not setting up the debauchery or whatever you want to say, or in this case a religion. It's just tolerating it, and you see a lot, like this whole tolerating. Like the drag queen story hours, or they had a drag queen guy up in the White House the other day, and I'm like, you know what? There's a lot of people, Democrats, leftists, that are good, hardworking Americans, and they'll never see the inside of the White House. They'll never get in there.
Yeah.
Why is that guy get special treatment to go in there just because he wears a dress? For crying out loud!
There's a great Babylon Bee article for any listeners who don't know what the Babylon Bee is. It's a satire website that puts out great fake headlines critiquing the government. They're right-leaning website. One of them was White House lit up with colors of pride flag to display the institution of an established church in the United States, which is very funny. Yeah, but it's what you're saying.
But true. Right.
Yeah.
Because that is the new religion, and you better follow the precepts of that religion, which is to change your language, to salute these people by calling them words that don't apply to them. Yes. I mean, it's really really goofy.
I saw this great Matt Walsh clip too. Maybe it was somebody else, but it was, along the lines of pronouns. What pronouns you should use, and of course, I think it was at like a live debate or something. And a student comes up and it's like, well, who are you to deny what words I use to describe myself?
Right.
Why do you have that control over language? And the guy, whether it was Matt Walsh or somebody else, is like, well, why does that only apply to pronouns? I'm now saying that my adjectives are handsome and brilliant.
Yeah.
Every time you talk to me, you have to call me handsome and brilliant. He's like, well, it's the same thing. Why do you have any right to say how I describe you?
Correct. That's right. I think that might have been on the Dr. Phil episode.
Oh, maybe. Yeah, I think it was.
I'm a little down on Matt Walsh. He was on Joe Rogan, and Joe Rogan's a big proponent of gay marriage, and he had Walsh just twisting in the wind.
Really?
He just was not prepared for it. Wasn't the topic of discussion, but of course you get on Joe Rogan, you're on there for 3 hours, and everything that he wants to talk to you about, you get to talk about. But he did a really poor job at defending a traditional argument in favor of restricting.
Well, Matt Walsh is better as a straight man against crazy people.
Yeah,
and Joe Rogan is kind of crazy, but he's not crazy to the extent
he's not crazy. He's very rational. You think he's crazy?
I think he could be slightly crazy at times, but
what do you mean by that?
He's just a weird dude. He's very strange. I guess it's really just sort of his character on air and stuff like that. 'Cause he's like a big wrestling guy. And the way he talks and uses his hands, he's all But I don't know.
You need to listen to him more.
Apparently, I don't have time to listen to 3-hour podcasts every day.
I don't really either. But like when I drive to court in another county, that's really my podcast time. But yeah, I mean, he's into all sorts of weird. He's very much into hallucinogenics.
Yes, that's where I'm thinking.
Yeah, and so it's interesting to hear him talk about it. And he says that's what got him through the most recent controversies about him and using the N-word on his podcast. They tried to cancel him, and he says the hallucinogenics got him through it. I don't know how they got him through it, but I guess he was in a different reality and came back. And
he didn't even need to hear the criticisms.
Yeah, but yeah, he's a funny cat. Yeah. But I wouldn't say he's crazy or irrational.
But he's certainly weird. I think he's
weird. How do you
everybody's weird. I don't know.
Yeah, so when everybody's weird, nobody's weird.
Sure. We should move on to our last thing. Okay,
but he's a big advocate for gay marriage. He's got some friends that are gay and they're married and all that kind of stuff. And so it's personal to him. And Walsh couldn't figure out how to get past that personal argument, I think.
Sure.
Anywho.
Moving on to the last thinker here, who's also very weird.
Saint Simon.
Saint Simon or Saint-Simon, probably. The French. But he was born Claude Henry de Rivoire, Comte de Saint-Simon, who was born in 1760, and he served in the American War of Independence and made a lot of money in the French Revolution and lost most of it afterward. But he was best known as the founder of Saint Simonianism, Saint Simonianism, which became a quasi-religious utopian sect that emphasized the importance of rational management, ensuring that productive resources are employed in the most productive fashion.
Pretty worthy cult.
Yeah, sure. He says it is not surprising that the Suez Canal was the work of a Saint Simonian disciple, Ferdinand de Lesseps. Saint Simon himself spent some years in Spain working on a plan to dig a canal from Madrid to the Atlantic Ocean. French railways were developed by Saint Simonians, as was the first French investment bank, the Crédit Mobilier. And I've never heard of Saint Simonianism, but evidently they were pretty prominent around this time and did some good things. But he says Saint Simon was quite often mentally ill and only focused on the revolution in the last 5 years of his life, from 1820 to 1825. And kind of drawing on the French Revolution, he said that he believed a properly functioning society would be organic, possessing a hierarchy of authority that reflected merit. Those with authority should be properly qualified to guide a productive and contented society. He says the French Revolution showed the question of the role of the poor in society and how authority relates to social integration. So raising these two big questions, because a lot of these riots were conducted by the lower class in France. Is it the question of, are we just always doomed to have poor people in every society? What role do they play in all of this? Can they move up in any fashion? But he says that society's function must match human nature. He says humans are born with different talent, and so we need a hierarchical organization based on that talent. A person who did the right kind of work for his talents and abilities and received proper material and spiritual recompense would be happy and willing to follow the properly appointed superiors. And he contrasted those who created something useful for the support of humanity and those who destroyed it in war or in ostentation. And he says that this prefigured industrial society and this idea that everything needs to be as productive as possible, and that is how we need to organize society. But he does mention that this is somewhat of a socialist sort of sect, this idea of, we need to make sure that everybody's doing the proper amount of work and get, exactly what they deserve. But it's not based necessarily, on this economic imbalance between the rich and the poor. It's based on this idea that everybody is innately different and they need to do exactly what is right for them. So very restrictive, but also, I think, more rationally planned out than a lot of socialists.
Yeah, like productive socialism as opposed to class warfare socialism.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Which is interesting. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on St. Simon? You were quiet throughout all of that.
Yeah, I thought
discussion.
it was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you summarized it well.
Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't seem like he's had too much impact on, a lot of later political thought. It seems like they were popular for a time, overwhelmed by Marxism.
Yeah, because because this guy's theory is more of you still have a certain personal responsibility and you still have to contribute. And if you're failing, maybe it's because you're not doing the stuff that you're good at, or that you're proficient at, or you're not doing it well enough. Marx is, the poor are poor because of the rich are, capital versus the laborers and all that stuff, and it's not your fault, and it's much easier to be a Marxist. It's easy to be a Marxist.
Sure.
It's not your fault. None of it's your fault.
Exactly.
It's their fault. Those bastards who get them.
Yeah, those fascists.
We
hate the fascists.
We got to take that stuff from them, and we'll spread it out, right? It's not fair that they have stuff and we don't have anything.
I get it for now, but I promise we'll all have it later on.
Well, first of all, we have to get it. All right, so let's not even talk about what happens after we get it. First, we get it.
Oh, what do you know? I control the entire army now. It is mine.
Well, somebody has to be in charge. Yes. It's just madness if everybody has an equal say. So I'm going to be the one that'll decide what's fair, because everybody wants something fair. And so I'll go ahead and decide what's fair.
We got to set up, the very democratic principles going forward. Make sure everybody has access. So for now, I'm going to hold on to everything.
Correct.
But as we're setting this up, I'll just hang on to it, and then you'll get it.
I'm a custodian of it.
Yes,
it's
exactly.
Your stuff. I'm just holding it for you, and it's a really hard work. So I'm
going to
nice
build a
place.
mansion.
People are threatening to kill me, so I need to have a lot of security. Because in order to get this work done, where we share everything.
Well, I'm working for you guys, right?
Yes,
so it'd be a shame if I died.
Yeah, you're really screwed if I die.
Yeah.
So
so just to make sure I don't die, I'm going to make sure that everybody's doing exactly what they need to. So I have this network set up to report back to me everything that you're doing.
Right, because there's a lot of capitalists out there.
Too many evil people. We need to set up some sort of prison in the Siberian wilderness to ensure that they
be a prison in existence, because the monarchs had that.
Yes.
So we'll just repurpose it and we'll put those damn capitalists in there,
because they're trying to destroy our state. But I'm making sure it's going in the right direction.
And wait, some of you people don't seem to understand that I am the one that is helping everyone. So I think that you people that are criticizing me, that used to be my best friends of the revolution, are now capitalists. You're counter-revolutionaries, and now you must all die.
That's a good summary of the
That's how it happens.
Of a communist state. That's fantastic.
Bingo! We got Stalin.
Yes. But he ends
Lenin first.
Yes. He ends this section on the French Revolution just with this brief retrospect, just kind of acknowledging the great impact. He says its effect on later revolutionaries was in many ways disastrous, because in the same way that generals habitually fight the last war, and their soldiers therefore suffer needlessly in the one that they are really engaged in. So revolutionaries subsequently believed that they were reenacting the Great French Revolution and suffered accordingly. But of course, he does acknowledge that this French Revolution was, very profoundly impactful on all of France and all of Europe as a whole. So
yeah, and I think the ones that tried to reenact it actually did. It's the same result.
Yeah,
they just do
carnage. Yeah.
Yes. Terrible.
Well, what are your thoughts on this chapter?
I've had enough thoughts.
You've had enough.
I think the listener is exhausted from hearing my thoughts.
Probably.
What are your thoughts?
I mean, I enjoyed the chapter. I mean, of course, I like Burke the most out of all of these, but Burke is still sort of a weird mix.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like with Burke and Joseph de Maistre, it's kind of like the enemy of my enemy is my friend in a way. They both have the right sort of end goal, but I don't agree with their means necessarily. I agree with them. French Revolution, awful, should not have happened in the way it did. Good maybe in the reforms in the beginning, but then quickly went off the rails. But, crushing the will of the people is not the way to go.
Right.
And I also don't 100% agree with Burke's idea that, we are somewhat like internally indebted to the people who came before us, which I don't know if it's exactly what he's getting at, but this idea that, we're just, sort of bound to whatever they came up with, and we just have to keep moving forward with that. But which I don't think that's exactly what he's arguing for,
right.
but it's sort of on the edge there, and I don't know if I
I mean,
agree.
certainly he's a traditionalist, and he wants to keep
Yeah.
Everything is the same as possible,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And I liked a lot of what Thomas Paine is saying,
Right.
especially, early on, but then weird dude,
Yeah.
really strange, weirdly, in favor of the French Revolution
Yeah.
and stuff like that. Can't imagine how he was so supportive of it, why he stayed in France after he was scheduled to be executed, but,
Well, he really-
bygones be bygones, I
He
guess.
did believe in that, that reason being the deity, essentially, and that's what they were trying. They were talking about that for years before they actually designated a deity of I forget what they called it. It was reason or something. So I mean, he certainly believed the same type of stuff as them. So I guess
Sure.
he was like, hey, let's let it ride. I don't know.
All right. Do you have any other closing things you want to say?
No.
Well, you can leave a review, and you will most likely win a free T-shirt because we've had no reviews yet. I haven't checked in a couple days, but I don't think we have. But the most interesting review, or at this point, any review,
we'll get a free T-shirt.
we'll be checking. Make sure you tweet us if you do leave a review at ULMTD Opinions on Twitter. I've been Adam Bishop,
I'm still Mark Bishop.
and this has been Unlimited Opinions.
Nice.
That was a good episode. You said it would be short.
How long was it?
We're at an hour 20.
Jesus.
It was all that fascist talk.
You invited me.
It was a good talk.